Welcome back to part 3 of the Honest Sex Summary for busy people. Honest Sex, remember, part 1 was about mature honesty. And part 2, what is sex actually? Mature honesty is the foundation of having a sex life and an intimate, sensual, exciting, romantic life and spark that lasts and that continues to become more exciting, more connected over time. Part 3 is tools for more connected and more satisfying sex. There are people who've come to work with me and I've asked them, have you talked about that struggle, that desire? And they say, no, we don't talk about sex in our relationship. And I want to take the shame out of this because most of us were never taught how to talk about it. And I will say, as a parent now, it is so awkward. And I wrote about this in the book. Like, what do we do? Talk about it over dinner or when your kid says, I don't want to hear about it? Or how do we get this information to our children so that they learn to value themselves and so that they learn that communication is actually a part of what creates an amazing sex life? How do we destigmatize this? My hope is that you can talk about sex, even though it feels vulnerable, in ways where you then are able to get more of your needs and desires met, where you can collaborate and co-create together. Hoping and praying that intimacy and sex will get better over time doesn't work. It sets you up to feel like a failure. It sets you up to think that it couldn't get better. I guess this is just what it is. This is what I got. But it's not true. Because if you talk about it, things can change. Okay, how to improve rather than kill your sex life with honest conversations. I love this image, the street signs, the convergence of truth and love. Because again, mature honesty, we're bringing truth with love. We're not bringing truth with resentment or bitterness. And the 4 foundations of conversations about sex that create more pleasure and connection are based in this intersection between truth and love. The first one is that when we're talking about sex, this can be, actually, we can expand this to any conversation. We're prioritizing curiosity over fear and defensiveness. So a common thing that happens is if you bring up a desire and someone's like, whoa, that terrifies me. Maybe internally they have that feeling. Externally, they might say, nope, that's not me. I don't do that. I don't like that. Why would you want that? That's disgusting. Or no, that doesn't work for me. And it becomes a very different conversation when we prioritize curiosity. And I work with couples on this, or people who are single and want this to go better in their next relationship, around what is it like to say, oh, wow, that scares me. I wonder what we could explore together that would make that easier for me. Or I wonder what we could explore together that would be a step in that direction, but that feels like it's out of my comfort zone. Okay, so prioritizing curiosity. And then it's really hard when you're speaking and you're met with someone's pushback or defensiveness. So even if something is fearful or you don't want it, you could still respond with, okay, I get that that's important to you. I don't want to yuck your yum. I don't want to make you wrong. At the same time, I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. The second foundation here is to get to the root of a desire. Oftentimes we say, I want something. I think my example in the book was a little bit edgy. It was someone who wants to be tied up. And the root of the desire, what I distinguished is that it can be really different for people. Some people want to be tied up because they want to have that sense of feeling contained. Some people want to be tied up because they can't do anything wrong because they can't do anything, right? It's like, oh, now I'm free. Some people want to be tied up because they want to fight and they want to push and see if they can get out. So one of the things that happens when we have a desire, someone might say, I want to be tied up. If the other person doesn't understand why, then you might really miss the experience. You might do it forcefully and the other person's like, oh, I wanted to feel cherished, or I wanted to feel really taken care of. Or it might be that if we knew why someone wanted to be tied up and the other person really wasn't comfortable with tying someone up, then I guarantee there are other ways to play with that motivation or that desire that aren't necessarily how we think of it at first. So the only thing I see is I want to be tied up with ropes. Something else might be I am held, or I get to fight back, or there are other ways to play with desires. It doesn't mean that that desire is necessarily going to go away, but first we get to create an experience where people feel some part of that desire is met, and then maybe we talk about it again later. The third one is being clear whether you're in exploring or decision-making mode. This has been really painful for me in relationship and even in a business relationship. If I'm just exploring, I want to do this, I want to try this could be amazing. And someone else is like, oh my God, now that you've said that, that means I have to do all those things. We are actively making a decision right now that we're going to do these things. That can be terrifying. And that can really break down a conversation where someone then feels like, well, I have to defend against this because that's not what I want. So as you clarify together, okay, is this an exploration conversation or a decision-making conversation? People can relax, and then you can come to the table and be more collaborative, which is number 4, being willing to collaborate. So how can we come together and create a win-win? How can we make this good for both people? And how can we take small steps to get there? We have the 6 fundamentals of deeper intimacy and better sex. Fundamental 1 here is being on the same team. Builds on collaboration. If it's a win-lose, it's not going to go well. Or if we feel like it's me against you, if you get what you want, I don't get what I want, then we don't win together. There's a we here, right? There's a we in the relationship. So thinking about it as being on the same team. The second fundamental is to recognize that differences can bring you closer. So instead of, sometimes actually that's what draws us together in the first place. Oh, that person's so different. That person's unique. They're the peanut butter to my chocolate or the jelly to my peanut butter. And then later it can be challenging. But if you start to look at differences and look at them through how can this bring us closer? How can we use these differences to connect? That is a very different orientation. Fundamental 3 is assume the best about each other rather than the worst. So what I mean by that is there are times where someone does something and we feel hurt and we go into, you meant to do that, you meant to hurt me, why would you have done it otherwise? We assume the worst. And I was working with a couple recently where I said, look at each other and consider that most of what's going wrong are misunderstandings. It's not malintent. You're not meaning to hurt each other, but we do feel hurt. So when you're assuming the best, you can get curious. And one way that looks is, hey, that really hurt my feelings. I'm going to assume that you didn't mean to hurt my feelings. Can you help me understand why did that happen? This is the fundamental of what creates better sex, because as we strengthen our connection, we allow spark to ignite more naturally. Otherwise, we're in this kind of push-pull with each other where it's not very sexy. Fundamental 4 is sharing why to deepen understanding. Oftentimes in heterosexual relationships, women come to the table thinking, well, you just want to have sex because we have all these thoughts about men are just physical. That's all that matters to them. Sometimes we have these judgments. A lot of times why men want to have sex is to feel loved, to feel connected, to feel like they matter. So if we can help someone understand why we want something, it really paints a more human picture. And the judgments or the fears that we have are often subsided in that. Fundamental 5 is to use desires, not complaints, to create more connection. So the way I see it is that desire and complaint are opposite sides of the same coin. And when you bring a complaint, people want to defend. People don't feel appreciated. People don't feel motivated to step into their highest self or their best self. Every complaint you can really look at, oh, okay, if I'm complaining because I don't like it like this, what do I actually want? What do I want instead? And I used to think that at some point, if we speak our desires enough, then we have to complain. But I got hip to the fact that complaining never worked for me. And so to create more connection, to create more spark, to create more desire, speak your desires. Start talking about your desires, not why are we not having sex or why are we not having the kind of sex I want? But you know what would be amazing? I want to have this kind of sex. I want to feel connected to you. I want to be adored. I want to, surrender, or I want to dominate, or whatever it may be. But start sharing the desires. It can be vulnerable. It's more vulnerable than sharing your complaints, but I promise it will go over better. And then fundamental 6 is to undefend yourself. So it's similar to not complaining, but as you're communicating, if you're making excuses or your partner says something or you say something and your partner feels hurt by it, and instead of just saying, wow, tell me more, I didn't mean to hurt you, I want to understand this. If instead of that you say, I didn't mean to, or I didn't do that, or you always get hurt, you're overly sensitive, that is not a fundamental that has someone then feel safe to open their heart or open their body with you. So as you can practice undefending yourself, and this stuff is not easy, right? We're not taught this. I would say to do this takes a lot. I've been learning this for 20, 25 years. So cut yourself some slack. You're not going to learn this overnight. And part of why I wrote the book and have the podcast and the courses that I have is because it can take some support for your unique challenges. One thing I like to say is that you can talk about sex anytime, and some topics go over better at different times. So let's start with during. In the moment, we can bring up needs and desires. We can bring up anything, like I said, but oftentimes you don't want to have a long dialogue. And so during a sexual experience is a great time to bring up needs, to bring up desires, to say, do you like it like this or do you like it like that? What would make this feel more amazing for you? Or give suggestions rather than putting someone back into their head to try to need to figure something out. So you can touch someone. Do you like firm pressure? Do you like light pressure? Do you like my nails or do you like my fingertips? So these in the moment, more simple conversations tend to go over better. That said, sometimes we need a pause. Sometimes we need a check-in. Sometimes we're not feeling like we are there together. And so sometimes we have longer conversations. Often, though, I think concerns and talking about safety and motivations and desires and fantasies, those, maybe not fantasies could go either way, but those tend to come before. So sometimes it's before the first time you ever have sex. If you're in a long-term relationship, it's more like in between sex. But I suggest talking about sex a lot more than most people are. And so if there's some way that you have a concern, bring it up. It'll go over better before you're in the midst of a sexual experience versus suddenly I need to bring up this concern. People can be really thrown off by that. Again, I'm not saying don't ever do it. I'm just giving you a sense of what tends to go over better at different times. And then after, and I have this slide here with this specific process, is what I call the debrief, right? You debrief so that future experiences are more satisfying. Again, you're not hoping and praying that the thing that really didn't work for you, that someone will just figure that out. You're talking about it. The way I frame the debrief, that both people answer these questions, the first one starts with the mindset of appreciation. What did you enjoy about our sex? That's going to help people feel appreciated and connected. Okay, there were good parts about this. The second one focuses on desires rather than complaints. What could make our sex even better in the future? So that same question could be, what didn't you like or what didn't work for you? But I highly suggest taking whatever complaint that might be and flipping it into a desire. If it was too fast or I didn't feel warmed up enough, what do I want? I would love to go a little slower. I would love to take our time. Okay, so you can flip the complaint into a desire. And then the last one is more of a catch-all. Is there anything that feels vulnerable about our experience that you can tell me now, even if you didn't say it then? Because sometimes it's too vulnerable to say it in the moment. Sometimes we don't realize until we look back. So this is a broader question that makes room for topics that we didn't cover in the first two. If you integrate this one tool, you're going to start having a very different experience. You're going to start being able to create more connection, more intimacy, and more passion. And this is what has sex and intimacy not fade and fizzle over time. I wanted to mention that in the book, there are 6 conscious relating tools you can use. I'll read them in case you're listening and not looking at the slides. The first one are agreements. How do we treat each other? How do we connect? How do we view sex and how do we want to come to sex? Like, oh, we're willing, we're vulnerable, we listen to each other. Just starting to explore that oftentimes when things go wrong, it's not like someone is breaking an agreement. It's that there never was an agreement. And so the more conscious we are about creating agreements, the more we tend to get what we want. The second one is a user guide, which looks at how do you map out the struggles or the tender triggered points that people tend to go through, and what could be something that would help them feel good in that moment. So it's like, I'm giving you the key. I'm helping you understand what's going to help soothe me, what's going to help me feel more safe and comfortable, so that you can stop guessing all the time. A CPR is something that you can write for an experience you want to have, context, purpose, and results. And so we can look at, okay, what is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of us going away together and having this vacation? Again, the more intentional we are, the more we tend to get what we want. The DEAR process is something that I often suggest instead of apologies. So we're actually declaring when we realize that we've done something we don't feel good about, and we're going through a process where we can hear someone, we can make amends, we can recommit or renegotiate. We're starting to hear the impact on someone. And this is a way to move through something that feels like a negative experience and ideally come out the other side feeling more connected. Number 5 is a race to vulnerability. And it's something that one of my friends and colleagues created with her husband, where whoever is more vulnerable first is the winner. And I practiced this in a past relationship. I remember we were frustrated and we were having a conflict, and we sat down on the couch and we both decided, okay, let's share what's vulnerable about this for me is. And it created so much healing. I mean, that time we were both willing to be vulnerable, and there really is no winner. It's just the idea that when somebody can bring vulnerability, it usually helps drop the walls for everybody. And then daily appreciation. I often see people not feeling appreciated and not feeling like they get that kind of reflection and gratitude and, being thanked for who they are and what they're doing and how hard they're trying. And so I often suggest a daily appreciation practice. One way you can explore this is to consider what's a conversation you want to have with a partner or a potential partner, if you're single at this point or if you're dating new people, about your connection or about this potential connection or sex. So what do you want to talk about? What would be helpful? What would move things forward for you? And then consider whether you want to have it before, during, or after a sexual experience. And the bonus would be, what might you communicate before, during, and after? So if you're feeling bold and you want to stretch yourself, you could consider different things you want to communicate before, during, and after. You could look back at a sexual experience you had and consider, what didn't I say? Where wasn't I true to myself? Where was there more pleasure possible that I left on the table because I didn't say it? I was afraid of hurting or offending someone, or I just didn't feel like I could get it out of my mouth. I felt ashamed. So start thinking about these conversations you want to have and start to at least have them with yourself. And then eventually start having them with another person. All right. That was part 3 of Honest Sex, the summary. If you want support, you can schedule an effortless love and sex consultation with me. I have a couple of these available a week. I make space for, sometimes they get booked up, but try and find a spot or reach out to me at Shayna@ShaynaJamesCoaching.com. If you can't find a spot, I will try to fit you in. I love supporting people. So reach out. You can always email me if you have questions. If you have revelations as you're reading the book or listening to the book, I would love to hear. And my belief is that you can have the love and sex life you want, even as you're getting older, even as things are more challenging, even as it's hard to find a time, maybe to even have sex with a partner. Just know that I believe in you, that I believe it's possible, and reach out to me if you need support.